Joining me now is Professor Ken Ife. Welcome to Dateline Abuja, Professor Ken Ife. You are the lead consultant at the ECOWAS Commission. Let's start with the general overview. What's your general perception of the state of the nation's economy?
Very challenging times, but it's a huge economy, and the biggest economy, by far the biggest economy in Africa, nearly equal to that of South Africa and Egypt put together, which are number 2 and number 3. And interestingly, with PwC, Pricewaterhouse, projecting that our economy could actually be number 10 with $6.4 trillion in 2050. It just goes to show how dynamic this economy can be. But there are challenging times, really challenging times. And as soon as we get on top of it, the country will continue to fly.
We've just had the 2016 budget approved by the National Assembly. How do you think it's going to shape the economy?
It's actually a progressive, growth-oriented budget because it does provide for 30% capital expenditure, where you know the growth comes from. And you could see the budget consciously, putting pressure on the expenditure side of the balance sheet. So it bodes well. And of course, the fundamentals are not that bad. $38, even if it comes down to 36, but we just managed to go above 40. So that's okay. And I think there's also something there on social inclusion, which balances growth and social inclusion, and also, a lot of investment in infrastructure, as I could see quite a bit. And then the budget approach, which is zero-based budgeting, actually makes sense because that is the only way you can unlock resources. On the previous incremental budget process, it only goes up, and you cannot disassociate so you can't get into the details. You can't actually do anything about those prices. Now you can. You can throw away things that are not relevant. You can see justification for anything and everything. So it's quite a good methodology to move forward. But I think on balance, although it's late in the day, 3 months gone, but we could catch up. And there is also some sweeteners in the budget. Some 350 billion naira going to come out somewhere to deal with particular issues around the state and federal, and in particular the contractors, the private sector contractors that have not been paid for quite some time now, and they've shedded jobs, so they are being remobilized. So that's good news.
What other sweeteners have we got?
Well, that's the key sweetener. that injection of is a stimulus, but it's targeted in cleaning up. When Buhari came in, he immediately addressed, his first act was to address the concern of the state governments on salary bills of arrears of over 1 year for some states, and then got the budget office and the CBN to all mobilize resources to sort out the states. But now we needed to get to the private sector as well, because when you leave them behind, private demand in the economy is down. We're already in recession, and you need to make sure that we are putting resources into the economy to increase growth and demand in the economy. So that is good news.
Let's now look at the recent NEC retreat, the National Economic Council retreat, in which the President identified 5 sectors which are crucial to revive the economy. So here we're looking at power, manufacturing, agriculture, housing and health. Do you agree that they're the crucial sectors that we need to focus on?
Well, health, in case of pharmaceutical, is a big industry. Even from Africa Union, we prioritize pharmaceutical. But health is more on a social inclusion agenda. So there are other issues around health that I would have thought solid minerals should have been mentioned, because South Africa, the mainstay of the economy is in solid minerals, and we have 44 solid minerals in mineable quantities, and they're all scattered across the country, not just found in one part. And I cannot see why you can't exclude solid minerals. But it's just, and even as we tend to have excluded oil and gas. But the area of upstream investment in oil and gas, I would say, is very suspect because of what is going on in the industry. But midstream and downstream, that is where the jobs are. You got to get investment there, because when you, the demand for the forex is $4.66 billion compared to $1 billion, which is what is the receipt. Now, 40% of that 4.6 is request for buying, importing fuel. So if you don't focus on downstream investment in that sector, you cannot get rid of that pressure on our foreign currency. So it's very, very important. And then also you say, but what are the examples? In Texas, over 200 petrochemical industries. So surely they're not producing for America, they're producing for the world. And then in the other one, Venezuela, over 35 refineries. They're not producing for themselves, they're producing for the world. And they have petrol stations all over America selling fuel. So there are investments that we could go down there for, and and create more employment and bring diversity and diversification in the economy.
The retreat, one of the issues discussed was a gradual increase in VAT, value-added tax. How do you see this happening? Very
important, actually, because there are three-pronged strategies. One strategy is we've lost more than $50 billion in our revenue, export revenue, so we have to have a strategy to push up export revenue by building sustainable export capacity and export competitiveness. Identify all those areas across the MDAs and all the private sector and push it up. But also you have to attack the demand side of the Forex to say, look, 4.66 billion, we're going to do something about this. CBN has started by targeting 41 items, which come to 1.2 trillion. But there are a lot more there. But it's not just enough to simply target them and deny them foreign exchange. No, you've got to get in and say, look, we want backward integration policy here. So, and what the resources you are bringing in, we have 1.36 trillion naira from Central Bank Intervention Fund. So you got to actually encourage those who are only importing to know that there are opportunities backed by policy of backward integration or import substitution. And that is where the pot of money is. When Dangote started in 2005, he was importer. Just like Innocent. Innocent is also importer of spare parts. But they have gone out on that policy with faith in that policy to take the resources, bring their own resources, and invested very heavily. Now, after building to standard and substituting, they now start exporting. So we are not exporter of cement. So you got to connect those, because the incentives you require for those who are investing, in fact, industry incentives, all of that are different from the incentive for those who are exporting, because they are looking more at export expansion grants and all that. Then the third area is widening the tax base, because at the moment our tax collection is about 6% of GDP, whereas all these countries in West Africa and Africa about 20% of the GDP. So there's a huge mileage, and the strategy is one, to widen the base, as Lagos has done successfully, and two is to raise the VAT revenue, which is shared between federal government and state. So this particular meeting that they had was a very good one. Because in there they communicated the desire, and they both agreed, both tiers of government agreed that they are going to have a staged increase in VAT, and because they are both beneficiaries of that, and then also that they will share best practices in widening the tax base. So it was a very good one. Apart from also the fact that they agreed that on the fiscal responsibility acts and policies that they are going to harmonize, and this is very, very important, that they are all singing from the same. After all, economic development is on the concurrent legislative list. They're all players. And in fact, if you look at the ease of doing business, the World Bank ease of doing business, there are 11 indicators there. 4 of those indicators rest squarely with the state governments. And then some are with the federal government, especially the trade across borders. But then the others are between the two tiers of government, both state and federal. So they've got to work together for us to actually dent to those figures. And it's not just that, there are others.
But what do you think was missing from the retreat? Do you think the private sector were effectively involved, for example?
Yeah, I think the private sector needed to be more involved, and private sector driven issues, especially the sectors, need to be overrepresented. But if I was organizing this conference, I would have had the first 2 days focusing heavily on the private sector driven aspects of the economy, but with the state and non-state actors. Then the third day would be for the MDAs, both at the federal and state level, to make sense of those strategic priorities that have been identified by the private sector, and then coalesce those into recommendations going to the final 2 days where the National Economic Council comes in. But that's the ultimate policy-making organ in the country. They should be dealing with specific recommendations. And they're saying that we're happy with this, we're happy. Then they now dwell on economic governance, which is really what they dwelt on. and harmonization and coordination between the two tiers of government. That is how I would have approached that.
Thank you very much, Professor Ife. We'll now go for a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more on the state of the economy.
From the Federal Ministry of Finance, in anticipation of the approval of the budget, we have actually lined up around 350 billion, which will be pumping into the Nigerian economy in the forthcoming months. We explained our rationale and the processes that we've put in place, safeguards to ensure that this money actually achieves the desired objective, which is to stimulate the economy. We're already discussing with some of the contractors who will be paid these monies and the objective and the overall determining criteria is how many Nigerians will be re-engaged. So we're specifically looking at contractors who have laid off staff. How many Nigerians are you going to put back to work as a result of this money that we're planning to release? And we believe that that will bring significant economic activity back.